Hi there. Thank you for staying for the news review. It's another beautiful morning. Right before we get into it, this review is brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They are offering you free prostate screening, free female fertility screening as well. You can locate them here in Accra at Spintex opposite the Shell signboard. Then Kumasi, Kronomabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex. There is Takrade Anaji Estate, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama in Zima. If you'd like to call them, these are the numbers to call: 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. Now, for the newspaper review this morning, we're joined by Sulemana Braimah. He's Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. A very good morning to you, Sule.
Good morning, Ben.
Mr. Braimah, it's been a while. How have you been in between?
Well, I'm coping.
Awesome. Like I usually do, it's a lean morning by way of the newspapers, just a fraction of the ones we'd usually have this morning. But I'd like us to start the conversation from the standpoint of some of the recent happenings. So there is that drowning incident, unfortunate incident in Fana, in the Ga East municipality, where 9 children lost their lives. They've been buried. This morning in the news, we were talking about the Greater Accra Regional Minister going there. Some have asked why other ministers, certain ministers were not there, but he was there. And now the directive is that young people, people below a certain age, should not row these canoes. That was what happened in this instance. It was a young person who may not have had that much experience. You can tag that to the incident in January in Wayokope, where 8 died. So 8 plus 9, you get 17. In the space of just about 5 months. I was speaking to someone earlier this morning, and the person said to me, you know what? It doesn't take much. They'll talk about it. But this, God forbid, likely will happen again because the structures are simply not in place and because our leaders do not care. Is that the same? Is that a sentiment you share? And how do you feel about that Fana development?
Well, let me start by saying that it's a very unfortunate incident, and condolences to the family. It must be a very, very painful experience to lose kids at that age and in that numbers. Now, I believe that it comes down to the whole question about collectively as a society taking responsibility and doing the right things. Yes, it is important that we ensure that authorities that are supposed to enforce our laws do so. But the reality is that sometimes the law enforcement agencies cannot be everywhere. The persons who are required to sort of command authority in ensuring that certain things do not happen would not be everywhere at all the time. And so we as citizens, as parents, as leaders in our society in various roles, also do have a responsibility in ensuring that certain basic rules are adhered to, certain basic principles are adhered to. I don't think that we should get to a point where we say we need a police officer to be present, we need a minister or the DCE to be present in order not to allow for the wrong things, not to allow the wrong things to happen, such as, having kids, take on the boats and then get themselves onto the water. So it's unfortunate, but these things should get all of us thinking. How do we collectively assume the responsibility of ensuring that society functions in a way that is orderly, that is disciplined, and ensure that we avoid some of these very, very, very fatal and tragic fatalities? I think we all have a responsibility to talk to each other, to preach to each other, to advise each other in ensuring that we all do the little that we can, even as we have duty bearers and law enforcement agencies to do what they have to do. We also have to play our role. Otherwise, I think some of these things would continue to happen.
Just before we get into the papers as well, there is the NDC's primaries, parliamentary and presidential. Of course, you know by now, most definitely, that the former president secured 98.9% of the votes cast. Dr. Dufour withdrew. Still, some people voted, sent him a few votes. Kojo Bonsu had 1.1%, and that was how the cookie crumbled. But on the back of that, the former president has been saying, again, something from our news this morning, that he will have a ministerial set of no more than 60, including deputy ministers, and that there will be no ex gratia for them. What do you make of that?
Well, certainly I think that we are in a country where even 60 is too large a number. But if you have a government that has gone past 100, then it makes the 60 something that looks quite fanciful, something that looks quite great. It would be a great start if 60 becomes the target and indeed what the practice becomes. I'm sure there would be other governments in the future who would promise that, look, we can do it with 40. And I believe that indeed, as a country, we can run this country with less than 40 ministers. But again, as I said, once the threshold has been moved above 100, at some point 110 or more, it makes the 60 quite a decent number to look at. The question of ex gratia, I think it is a very, very immoral practice that has persisted over the period. And I wonder why...
Did you just say you thought it was a very immoral practice?
No, it is. It has always been an immoral practice. And I believe that there are people who should begin to be asking themselves and questioning their conscience why over the years they've been the beneficiaries of multiple ex gratias in a country where, you know, several people are struggling to survive, in a country where, as I always would mention, we still have kids lying on their bellies to study, as was revealed in your recent documentary on Ghana Schools of Shame, in a country where mothers are dying during delivery and infants are dying from mosquito bites and so on. Why would we have, for example, a Council of State that is supposed to be advising the president? Persons that I believe are there because they are accomplished set of people who certainly have lived lives that are worthy of emulation and have been brought together to advise the president. And what they do is, first of all, take car loans that have, I mean, for me, in my view, it's actually not a loan. Because if you are taking a car loan that the interest is being paid by the state, and about 70 or 60% of even the actual amount is also being paid by the state, what kind of loan is that? And then you serve for 4 years, and sometimes, and it's even part-time, because some of them are actually working, it's part-time. And then at the end of 4 years, you take, you know, ex gratia from the state, including persons who have retired on salary, like the former Chief Justice, like the former CDS. These are people who have retired on salary, taking their end of service benefit, and yet are, you know, being paid every month, just as Supreme Court justices are being paid. And then at the end, and then of course they receive allowances as, you know, Council of State members. And I'm talking about allowances in quote because it is not, I mean, 1,000 cities or 2,000 cities. And then at the end of 4 years, you collect, you know, 400, 500,000 as ex gratia. And if you are on again, at the end of another 4 years, you do the same thing. And this applies to parliamentarians and all the other Article 71 appointees. I think that it has been an immoral practice, and persons who have benefited from it continuously should really question their conscience, whether indeed they have acted as patriots to this country. So I think it's a great thing if the former president says, look, if I get power, I'm going to scrap that particular practice. It is something that ought not to have been in existence in the first place. And in my view, it's one of the things that shows how greedy our leaders are and how greedy perhaps those who formulated the Constitution thought they ought to have been. So, well, it's a positive thing if he happens to get the power, and will do it indeed.
That's an interesting take you have there on this matter of ex gratia. Some also feel, why should others benefit for us not to benefit? But some have said that, look, you can do without this. I mean, in other jurisdictions, they have their own systems, but that we are going over the top, especially considering our economic situation as a country. Let's get into the daily guide. There's more talk about money there. IMF cash hits Bank of Ghana this week. The projections are that from tomorrow onwards, we should be getting that money. The first tranche of about $600 million. OSP chases money-throwing NDC MP aspirant, and I'll be delving into related issues there with you. Prepare your handing over notes, Mahama, to NPP. And Hajia for real, extradited to US in $2 million romance scam. That has also been trending. Amanase chief begs Ochehene. That story there as well. On the back page, it feels like there is no hope. It has to do with Arsenal and their title race. In fact, also there, Partey's form dipped at a crucial time. And those are the comments of Manchester United legend and Sky Sports pundit Gary Neville, who has blamed Arsenal's title woes on the drop in performance of midfielder Thomas Partey, our very own Partey. Players resist LGBTQ plus gesture. What's the story there? Several Toulouse players were withdrawn from the squad for Sunday's Ligue 1 draw against Nantes after they refused to have their names associated with a league-wide gesture of support for the LGBTQ plus community, the club said. And then there's HD Plus pledges support for Homowo Marathon. That's just in sports. Later, you can share your thoughts on the players resisting LGBTQ plus gesture and whether Thomas Partey, in the end, was the undoing of his team, Arsenal. But let's start from the start. Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam Anta, has stated that the International Monetary Fund is likely to transfer the first tranche of $600 million to Ghana immediately after the executive board approves the country's request for an extended credit facility. According to him, the second tranche of the same amount will be released before the end of the year, with a remainder disbursed in equal tranches of $360 million after a semi-annual review. Quoting him, he says, "We expect a deal on Wednesday." Dr. Anta is quoted to have told Reuters, adding, "With the disbursement, there is going to be $600 million as a first tranche just immediately after the approval." That is it. And let me just tie in the money-related story so you can actually link both of them. So on the OSP chasing money-throwing NDC MP aspirant, and I think Domiadra Obum, we saw a certain IE there with a car parked full of rice that he was sharing. So you go and vote. I don't know how he was getting his proof, his checks, but you go and vote and then you come and pick up your rice. But in this incident, the Office of the Special Prosecutor summoned Juliana Kenangwasan, a defeated NDC parliamentary aspirant, for a Dumasi over a suspected instance of corruption against her. Juliana, who placed fourth in the parliamentary primary after garnering 216 votes, threw money on delegates at the Ahmadiyya School Park during the polls as a way of voter inducement. Just to cut a long story short, she did this twice, and she claimed she found money in her car and started sharing the money. Who put the money there? I guess she would be the best person to tell us. Money in our politics. What do you make of these developments, Sulemana?
Well, first of all, on the IMF deal, sometimes I feel that as Ghanaians, we have dug ourselves into a pit that, really makes us look quite. For me, it's an embarrassing development that a country like Ghana, right now, have gotten ourselves into a situation where governments would want us to applaud them on whether or not they are getting the IMF deal within a certain period of time. And yesterday, when I read about this $600 million as first tranche, I was asking myself, really, is it what would $600 million do to our economy? I think that we've had far more. In COVID, we got more money in than $600 million. And yet, how transformed did we get our economy? And so, well, that's where we are, where anything matters. But I would prefer that the government perhaps shuts its mouth, and then the next time they are talking to Ghanaians, they will say, well, the IMF money is here. Because when this whole enterprise started, we were told, oh, we'll get it in 3 months. Then it was, oh, in 6 months. Oh, it was by the end of the year, the IMF deal would have been sealed. Oh, now we are looking at by the end of the first quarter of 2023. And first quarter came to pass, and now we are being told, oh, by next week, the money will hit our accounts. Well, maybe it's a way of managing people's anxiety, ways of trying to shore up the city's value so that people don't lose confidence and all of that. But if it is, I think that it is getting quite too much. And what is important is not about when and how much is hitting our accounts. It's about how we are managing the economy going forward. I read yesterday where I think it was the same, my good friend, Dr. Amin Anta, being said to have said that once the IMF deal is approved, Ghana can go to the capital market again. And I was asking, what? So Ghana can go back to the capital market to continue to borrow? Is that what we want to do? So it's a sad development, but I'm just hoping that collectively as Ghanaians, we would do perhaps more than we have done to keep our government in check and to get our government to act in a more responsible way. Money in our politics.
And just to add to the money in the politics, all these people who used some form of inducement lost miserably. And tied to that, the former president made some pledges to some people. TNT, transportation of 40 Ghana cedis. In one constituency, they agitated that if they didn't get the 40 Ghana cedis, they wouldn't go ahead to vote. I hear that is also something that is on the OSP's radar, or some people are proffering that that too should be on the OSP's radar. What's your thinking on that, in addition to Juliana's issue?
Well, I think that on these issues, we are perhaps acting quite hypocritically. We know that one of the tragedies of our politics is the excessive use of money. When you say that all those who used some sort of inducements lost, that may not be the reality. In fact, it is all those whose acts of inducements were open and witnessed, perhaps are those that we will say lost. I don't think that any of the contestants can come out and say that they did not use money. In fact, those whose actions we did not witness perhaps are the ones who even paid more. And if you knew anyone who was contesting, you would have heard the lamentations about how much is going into this business of trying to contest, both incumbents and those who were trying to unseat incumbents. The money in our politics is perhaps the major driver of the monumental corruption that we are witnessing in our society. Whether it is presidential race that is ongoing in the MPP or the one that has just concluded in the NDC, significant amounts of monies would have been used, even including that of President Mahama, for me, which was a no contest. Even that, I'm sure a lot of monies would have gone into. The most important thing for the OSP to do, perhaps, is to take steps to see in what ways can we compel people to disclose where they are getting their monies from, and in what ways can we make political party financing more transparent. But yes, it is important to invite this lady who was seen splashing cash out there. When I saw it and people were complaining, I said, okay, so if this was, let's say, 5 cedi notes, then she takes a bundle and then throws it in the air. You see 100 notes flying all over. She takes another one, does the same thing, and then maybe 10 times. That's 5,000, essentially. But people are spending hundreds of thousands in different ways that may not have been observed.
But does it make it right? We're talking about the monetization of our politics and where that is leading us, the precipice. That doesn't make it right. Or is it because everybody is doing it? So if someone comes to the fore and we condemn that person, we're wrong.
No, absolutely, it doesn't make it right. But the point I'm making is that we would not go anywhere if all we are doing is to look out for those whose actions we can see, when others are doing it and we know they are doing it. I don't think that the OSP, my friend Kisie Dabin, doesn't know that all these candidates were paying people. I mean, we all know. And you talk to people and they will tell you how much they received. There were people who were receiving 500 cedis per candidate. I mean, from one candidate, 200 cedis. Somebody will pay 500, this person will come and pay 600, this person will come and pay 300, and so on. The question is, at the end of the day, how are these people expecting to recover all these huge expenses? And of course, what it means is that they get to Parliament and they have to make, they have to make that money back. And in fact, they have to even make it more. You can't also blame those who are demanding, because our politics today is such that what happened is a contest about who is going to get elected to make money. It's not about who is going to get elected to serve the interests of the public, to make the laws that are in the public interest and so on. It's essentially about a competition to make money, a competition to get power, a competition to have privilege. And that is why we are in a system where people will never resign, no matter what. They won't resign because they are in there for power, for money, and for privilege. In other jurisdictions where people see their opportunity to serve as, a calling, they would immediately, hand over and move on, because they are in there to serve the interests of the people and not to make money. In our case, it is different. The point I am making is that the monetization of politics is not the right thing, but it would be, quite hypocritical for us to pretend that, others didn't do it, and those who did it are the ones who splashed money in the air. We need to approach it with a very comprehensive strategy, and adopt practices elsewhere where people have to disclose their source of financing. Otherwise, it is criminal. So I'm saying that the woman who was seen doing that is perhaps maybe she didn't even have enough money to pay what people were paying, and she wanted just to show it publicly. I'm not saying it is right, but everyone else did it. And so as a country, we need to approach this with a lot of seriousness rather than, pick and choose based on what we see.
Let's pick two more stories from the Daily Guide newspaper very quickly and call it a wrap for that paper. Prepare your handing over notes, Mahama, to NPP. And former President John Dramani Mahama sent a message to the New Patriotic Party to start preparing its handing over notes to leave office after the 2024 general election. According to him, Ghanaians have witnessed the incompetence of the governing NPP and are waiting to vote massively for the NDC come 2024 to rescue the country. He indicated that the Akufo-Addo-Bawumia-led administration had mismanaged the country, which had resulted in the bad economy the country was currently facing, and assured that the NDC would rebuild the economy and bring back licenses of banks which were wrongfully cancelled. Then he talks about the 60 ministers, deputy ministers, and other appointees. I'll quickly come to you for your take on that right after this one. Galamsey pit swallows 17 others missing, and we know of that recent incident in the Braimah North District. But the one I want to focus on, Ghanaian social media influencer Hadia for real name Mona Faiz Montrage, has been extradited from the UK to the US for her alleged involvement in a $2 million romance scam. Federal prosecutors say the socialite cum musician allegedly defrauded elderly single American men and women out of over $2 million in a depraved Lonely Hearts scam. Reports indicate that Hadia for real appeared in a federal court in Manhattan yesterday for her alleged involvement in several romance scams. Any reactions to these, especially as young people nowadays look to many different ways to make ends meet, but some of those ways may not necessarily be proper. What's your take?
Well, what I would say is, well, if the developments on this, Mona being extradited to the U.S. is alleged acts of criminality. And indeed, if it happened, then of course it is right that she's made to face justice. And the victims, as we are being told, are mainly citizens of the United States. And once there is that agreement between the UK and the US for persons who may have committed an offense to be extradited, I would say yes. I mean, it should happen. We should wait and see how the justice delivery system would go and what the conclusion would be. But as you've said, it's important that we keep highlighting the point that money is not everything. Even if you have all the money in the world, that shouldn't, I mean, it's important. Yes, it's important to have money, but not to have money through cruel means, through fraudulent means, and through, practices that would end up putting you into trouble. It's unfortunate, but it should be a lesson for all of us, even though, yes, trial is still ongoing and we don't know how it will end. But in our country, talk about those who are engaged in the Sakawa practice, and, people will tell you how many cars somebody is driving, how many houses somebody has as a result of certain activities that they are engaged in. I think that shouldn't be the motivation. Let's work hard, let's do the right things. And I'm sure if we work hard, we are disciplined, we are honest, we can at least have what would make us comfortable. So that would be my message to colleagues and young folks in our country. The other sad incident about the collapse of the Galamsey pit that has resulted in the death of a number of people, very unfortunate. Again, it points to the whole failure in dealing with the Galamsey menace. And as I said, it's a very complex development because people are struggling to make ends meet. And yet we have a system that is not working for many people, working just for a few, as a result of governance failure over the years. And that then leads me to President Mahama's comment about asking the MPP to prepare his handing over notes. I think whatever the outcome, the current MPP administration would indeed prepare a handing over notes, but whether that notes will be getting back to another MPP-led president or an NDC president is something that we all do not know. There is no doubt that this government has really been a disappointment in terms of the expectations that we all had. COVID, Russia, Ukraine, all those are alibis. I think that the government has indeed failed in many ways, but that is not to also say that the Mahama administration was a fantastic administration. I think that it also had its own failures. And over the years, if we had had governments that truly and honestly deliver on behalf of the people, I think Ghana would have been a significantly better place than we are now. So, yes, we are living in a mess as a result of mismanagement, as a result of the failure of this government, but it shouldn't get us to be complacent and say, well, maybe having the NDC back is the ultimate solution. We need to build that momentum that will hold any government in power accountable and responsible to the people. Other than that, the NDC comes to power and it is the same story. Ministers would enrich themselves, appointees would enrich themselves, and we know NDC ministers who have made it, bought several houses, bought houses in the US, in the UK, and so on and so forth. Where did they get those monies from? It's the same practice of corruption. So, as many would say, we are in a fix, in our country. People would have thought that, President Akufo-Addo will be a fantastic leader. He's come and he's been a disappointment. People were disappointed with President Mahama and his leadership. Right now, we are between, as they say, the devil and the deep blue sea, and we don't really know where to go. But whatever, democracy remains our best choice, and we must continue.
Let's wrap the conversation with these stories. The Finder and the Chronicle newspaper. Starting with the Finder. Transport fares reduced by 10% effective tomorrow. That story is on page 5. Ghana lacks processing capacity to soon ban raw minerals export. That is on page 4. And government owes us over 16 billion Ghana cedis. Road and building contractors cry out. We don't even need to get the details of this. We already know. So despite paying 10 billion Ghana cedis to contractors in 4 years, so over 4 years, 10 billion Ghana cedis has been paid, government still owes them, according to the group, over 16 billion Ghana cedis. And that is the road and building contractors crying out. On page 5, let's take a quick look at that story. So transport fares for commercial vehicles plying the roads in the country are set to reduce by 10% on Wednesday. The move follows the recent downward trend of petroleum prices. There's also this one in the Chronicle, a victory speech pledge. Mahama to return Unibank to Dufour. Of course, he may not have said directly that just Unibank, but he said broadly that those that had been affected by the banking sector cleanup through some illicit means, so to speak, or unfairly, would have that returned. What is your take on this as we wrap? We have just about 2 minutes.
Well, rightly said, Mahama may have not said that I will return Unibank to Dufour, but made a general comment. I think that's quite a diabolic headline on the part of the...
Which is why I situated it in context, in its proper context, very quickly.
And so I think it's a big conversation. I am not a finance person, but I think that whole whole-scale or full-scale collapse of those, several banks was a very, very terrible decision by this government. The government had the 21 billion or so that it claims it used to pay compensations and do the restructuring. I think that a lot of those banks could have been saved, and the jobs that were lost could have been saved. So for me, it was quite a terrible decision. If there were a few banks that were certainly banks that ought to go, yes, they could have gone. But from analysts and all of that, you hear that a number of banks were quite resilient and could have been supported in one way or the other to keep their employees and to keep the banking sector going without necessarily having to spend the so-called 21 billion that was spent on the banking sector cleanup exercise.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, it would be worthwhile to look into what went into the banking sector cleanup. And finally, I think one of the things that President Mahama said that I read yesterday was the fact that if he happens to get power, he would take the Ahmed Swale investigations quite seriously. I think that is a very, very welcoming development. Hopefully, it will get even this government to want to do the right thing, because, as they say, impunity begets impunity. And as we know, press freedom in our country over the last 4 or 5 years under the Akufo-Addo regime has not been.
Did my ride just cut you off?
I actually fully made my submission.
Okay, all right. I was just hoping I had not cut you off. Sulemana, we're grateful that you've joined us this morning. As always, we want to see you more. It's been a while, and we wish you the best of the day, sir.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Sulemana Braimah, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Of course, this segment brought to you by Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic. They're offering free prostate screening, free fertility screening as well. You can locate them here in Accra, Spintex opposite the Shell signboard, Kumasi, Kronomo Abohia, behind the Angel Educational Complex, Takrade Anaji State Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanso and Esiama and Nzima. You can also call them on 0244 867 068 or 0274 234-321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. A very happy birthday, well, belated happy birthday to Rita Edem Dugbe. Very good friend of mine. Rita, forgive me, I actually didn't see yesterday, but belated happy birthday to you, and we wish you the best of God's blessings. On that note, let's settle for what's coming in sports.